If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, welcome back to the Out of Bounds podcast. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here, looking ahead to the Tour Championship after an incredible weekend in Chicago at the BMW. Nate, talk about exciting. You got one player absolutely lighting it up, and then the world number one player kind of falling apart at the end. What a Sunday.
Well, yeah, what a Sunday is right. An absolutely star-studded leaderboard, right, going into Sunday at the BMW Championship. It looked like Scottie Scheffler could not necessarily be in cruise control because he did make a lot of birdies, up until the end of that round with Fitzpatrick really battling close to him. And then Hovland lights the world on fire, shoots 28 on the back nine, wins the event, vaults himself up to number 2 in the FedEx Cup standings going in this last week. But what a back nine from the Norwegian star. Just an unbelievable display of golf. I think he hit 9 of 9 greens, 7 of 8 fairways, just ball striked his way around that back nine, knocked in some good putts too as well, to gain another victory on tour this season. What a wound.
Yeah, and that 28 on the back breaks the course record, 61. Just super impressive performance all the way around. And it was interesting. They mentioned it on the broadcast, but watching Scottie come in that final group just kind of deflated the energy when Hovland walked off the golf course after he buried that last putt on 18. Yep. The energy was gone. Like there was no energy left on the golf course at all. And obviously, poorly timed bogey there on 17 pretty much took Scheffler out of contention. But again, great event, great weekend. I think that is, if we're going to create a stereotype or the poster leaderboard instead of poster child for what the PGA Tour wanted out of a playoff event, Sunday leaderboard, that's the one.
Right. I mean, you have Hovland winning, Scheffler and Fitzpatrick in that final group battling it out. And then you have Homa, Harmons, Schauffele, Sungjae Im was around. You had just a star-studded leaderboard. Russell Henley, too, who's played well all year. You have just these unbelievable players, in this second to last PGA Tour event. Like you said, Josh, just an amazing outcome for the PGA Tour. I was a little bit sad, and I'm still a little bit hurt holding that Scottie Scheffler 10-1 ticket, thinking I could get it back to the window, but my other bets hit for the week, so that was good. But still was a little bit sad watching Scottie Scheffler come down. But I love watching Viktor Hovland, and what a round from him. And it's even better for the Ryder Cup coming up here too. He's showing his powers too, as some of these golfers have been playing really well too. So just good stuff all around for the PGA Tour this week in Chicago.
Absolutely. And a 9-year streak came to an end long before the final round. Hideki Matsuyama withdrew prior to the start of round 2 because of a back injury. It had been 9 straight years that he had made the Tour Championship.
Wow.
That crazy? Like that I didn't even, when I saw that from PGA Tour comps, they tweeted it out early Friday or late Thursday. I could not believe it, but also he has been one of the most consistent golfers over the last decade. So not a huge surprise.
Yeah, I think Sungjae Im's got a pretty good streak going too now. I'm not sure who the longest active streak is now, but Sungjae, since he's got on the PGA Tour, he's been in the Tour Championship every single year, which is pretty darn cool to see.
And then we've got some playoff positioning notes. Who were the last 4 in and first 4 out?
So a lot of drama on Sunday, and it really was interesting when it came down almost to that final putt from Hovland. But the last 4 in, Emiliano Grillo, Tyrrell Hatton, Jordan Spieth, and Sepp Straka are in. That kicks out Sahith Theegala, Chris Kirk, Denny McCarthy, and Justin Rose. One thing that kind of screams to me is a lot of these guys like Hatton, Spieth, even Grillo a little bit too, are kind of journeymen on the tour. Have won a lot in their career. Emiliano Grillo has won this year. Jordan Spieth is Jordan Spieth, right? They kind of get in, and some of these new crop of guys like Sahith Theegala and Denny McCarthy get kind of kicked out. So that's a little bit sad in the golf nerd sense in my mind, because I like watching some of these young players, especially too. But they'll certainly have their chances here the next few years, as Denny McCarthy and Sahith Theegala played very well on tour this year.
Yeah, and I also, out of those 8 guys that you mentioned, I think the one I was most happy to see get in was Sepp Straka, just because of how far he had come, and obviously he's going to be on this Ryder Cup team, the Euro Ryder Cup team, not in by technicality of points, but he's a deadlock for their team just because of how well he's played. So I was really happy to see him because he was hovering. You know, you talk about heading into the weekend, he was kind of in that like 30 to 32 range where like a couple bad holes, frankly, for any of those guys who were in that area would have meant season over, done. So good to see.
Yeah, I think Straka didn't do himself any favors. I know he missed a relatively short putt on Saturday to kick himself out, but there's just so much jockeying for position on Sunday. I think the broadcast did a really nice job of kind of displaying where guys were, you know, and kind of talking about, well, if he makes this 8-footer, if another guy makes this 8-footer, kicks this person out or kicks this person into, and kind of showing the players as well, too. They had a camera on Terrell Hatton, which is always a good thing, you know, kind of showing what's going to happen with him on the last few holes, too. So hats off to the CBS crew. That I think they did a nice job kind of displaying who's going to make it to Eastlake next week.
Yeah, they did. But you brought up a good point on Sunday while we were watching. We weren't watching in the same place, but there were definitely some gaps in who we were seeing play. You texted me, I think it was like kind of around, it must have been halfway through the final groups their last 9 or last 18, saying that you hadn't seen Homa in
it was the next Homa and Brian Harman group. They were par in the death out of the course, so I kind of shows why they wouldn't show them, but it is kind of funny to kind of laugh at that part of thing. I don't think it was too egregious. It was egregious that we didn't see them at all really until their, you know, I think there was like the par 5, the 16th hole where we finally got to see them a little bit, but I don't really blame them too, especially with how well Viktor Hovland started to play on the back nine. You have to have every single Viktor Hovland shot on TV, right? You can't miss a single shot from him. Yeah. Scottie Scheffler too as well, and Fitzpatrick too, battling for the lead. So I don't think it's necessarily a gripe for me. I just kind of thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess that's one thing that I've never really thought about before, but I'd be curious what the numbers are. Like, how many shots can they conceivably show in like 30 minutes or in an hour?
I don't know. There's got to be rules for that. I don't have it off the top of my head. They have to get their sponsors, you know, kind of shown in there too as well.
I think that would help people kind of understand why you sometimes will see like a group that's only like 2 or 3 back from that final group. You won't see them that much on TV if they're not like making a move, because there's, you know, finite number of slots where you can show shots during an hour, because you do have your sponsor obligations. You do have commercials. You do have to show your leaders and, you know, the guys that just kind of fire it up and start playing like Viktor Hovland did on Sunday.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was passively watching, but I didn't really have a problem. I just kind of thought it was funny with Homa and Homa and Harman not being shown much at all. But, you know, looking back at their scorecards and kind of showing how their rounds went on Sunday, I don't really blame them for not showing them that much.
Yeah. And now we move forward to the Tour Championship at Eastlake down in Georgia. Talk to me. Who do you have to win it all this weekend?
Oh, I want I want to just pick Scheffler. I think he's too good right now, playing too well to win, but I just want to have a little bit more fun, a little bit more chaos. I think Rory gets it done again. You know, he came back last year from down 6. This year he starts down 4. So why not? You know, in a year where Rory McIlroy has been in the headlines for a lot of reasons, not available to golf, you know, whether they be him withdrawing from a couple different tournaments and seeking fines, or the Live PGA stuff. You know, Rory's been, you know, on the mic a lot and starting to play better golf here this last second half of the season. So I would love to see Rory come out, light the world on fire, and show why this Euro Ryder Cup team isn't, I don't think, be counted out in this Ryder Cup coming up.
If you want chaos, then you need to be rooting for Lucas Glover.
That would be cool too.
He starts 5 under, 5 back. If he somehow found a way to pull this off, it would be the wildest turn of events ever.
I'll tell you what, he's on the Ryder Cup team if he does.
Oh my God, he has to be. He has to be. I think he already has to be. We'll get into that later, but like, he would absolutely have to be. My pick for this weekend is Scottie Scheffler. I know, boring, boo me for picking the most boring golfer you could possibly pick. He hasn't gotten it done, but I think this is the weekend he'll get it done. I think back to last year, he shot 73 in that final round. He kind of just fell apart. For some context, he's shot 73 or worse only 7 times out of 88 rounds this season. Like, he's been scoring average leader throughout the season this year. So he's played super consistently. He leads strokes gained in virtually every category there is. I don't see him shooting a final round 73 or 74. I don't see him shooting more than 71 at any point this week. So if he just goes out and shoots his average 68, 69, 67, round 1, 2, and 3. I think in the final round, he'll be able to put it in cruise control and put this thing away. And in my opinion, shut up all the talking heads and people who I've been listening to talk to over the last few days about player of the year and how someone other than Scheffler is player of the year, which is just the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't care that he didn't win a May. I don't care that he's only won twice or whatever the case may be. He has played the most consistent golf we've seen since Tiger Woods, period. So
yeah, I would agree with that, Josh.
I think he puts an exclamation point on the season right here, shuts everybody up, gets a win. He doesn't have to be the best putter this weekend. He just needs to be an average putter. And I think this will be the weekend he does.
He just isn't an average putter, Josh. I mean, that's really the kind of the name of the game with this now. I mean, he was in the bottom half of the BMW strokes gained putting, in which it was just wild. He's continuously on the top of the leaderboard, whether he's not winning all the time, of course, but he's continuously on the top 5, top 10 of the leaderboard, top 12 for most of the season. And he's bottom half in putting every single week. And he's done these putting changes and talked a lot about it, and nothing's just happened. Josh, did you see the Justin Ray tweet about Scottie and how he can catch a Tiger Woods statistic this week?
Yeah, with greens.
He needs 62 greens in regulation hit this week to touch Tiger as the only player to hit 75% of their greens in regulation for a season. Now, Josh, let me just put in some context. His career high is 61 in a PGA Tour tournament, so it's unlikely that he gets it done and hits that Tiger record. I think this just goes to show how nuclear Tiger Woods was back during his prime. 75% of your fairways during a PGA Tour season is just ludicrous.
Knowing what we know about his putting, if he does get 62 greens, he wins, right?
Yeah, I think if you had 62 greens and out of it, 62 greens in their PGA Tour tournament, I don't think it's hard to lose. I think you have to be the worst putter of the 30 players and maybe you still even win.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Ryder Cup, because that seems to be the thing that's getting a lot of buzz, a lot of traction. Of course, things on paper, I think, are supposed to be settled out now, right? Like we're supposed
the top
to be
6
done.
is cemented. Yep. So you have Scottie Scheffler, Wyndham Clark, Brian Harman, Patrick Cantlay, Xander Schauffele, and Max Homa as your top 6. That'll be heading to Rome here in about a month.
So who do you have as your other 6? Well, who do you see as like your other 6 guys? If you had to pick, having seen what we've seen now, we have 3 playoff events. I don't think the Tour Championship should really count or should matter. I think we should be able to make a decision at this point. Obviously, Captain Zach Johnson's probably going to watch what happens this weekend and maybe make some picks based on that. But what are your thoughts here?
So I think the big thing that comes out of my mind is coming out of the top 6 this week was Brooks Koepka. He's been there all year since he's won in Rochester, right? He's been in that top 6 in the Ryder Cup. He gets kicked out, just hasn't played enough events. Doesn't play in any PGA Tour events, obviously, only played in the majors this year. So I think he's an absolute lock. I think you need to get your head examined if you don't think Brooks Koepka's on the US Ryder Cup team. So he's my 7th guy. And then looking at the rest of my team, I got Spieth, Bradley, Fowler are my definites. And then the last 2 spots, I think, can be talked about. And Josh, I think you have a little bit difference to say about this, but there's last 2 spots, in my mind, you're looking at Colin Morikawa, Cameron Young, Justin Thomas, Lucas Glover, Bryson DeChambeau. I think those are your 5 players that you're looking at in terms of getting on those last 2 spots. And I lean Morikawa and Cameron Young. And I know we've talked a lot about Lucas Glover and how well he's played. And, there's a lot of discussion about Bryson DeChambeau getting on this Ryder Cup team, especially with that 58 at the Greenbrier. So I think those are my 2 guys, Morikawa and Young. Cameron Young has played well enough to get on this Ryder Cup team and become another rookie to be on this team.
Yeah. You know what? I think part of my issue at this point is with the Keegan pick. Obviously he won the Travelers, which was fairly recently, but before that he hadn't won anything. You have to go all the way back to the Zozo last year in October, for that second victory in this quote unquote season. And it's pretty much because of that I just can't get behind him as a pick. Like Koepka's an automatic. I agree with you. I think if Koepka's not on your team, you're a crazy person. And you're just letting the political back and forth of how you feel about LIV and PIF cloud your vision on who is truly among the best 12 golfers that the USA team could put forward. Jordan Spieth, he's a de facto captain. I know he's not technically, like, obviously he's not a captain, but he is that
well enough.
Yeah, and he's that leader that the team needs. Colin Morikawa, Ricky Fowler, they're also, I would say, two guys that are quote unquote automatic because of what they bring to the table. And then this is where you and I definitely differ. I think Lucas Glover, because of how he's played lately, and Cam Young, because of where he sits in the standings, the Ryder Cup standings, he's number 9. I know that's not technically an automatic bid, but why have a point system, right? Like you've said this a million times, why have a point system if you're not going to, at least consider the guys that are inside the top 10. But I just don't know how you can't take Lucas Glover with how well he's played. And he played well this past weekend too. It's not like he played poorly. Like he had a solid finish. If he plays well this weekend, I think it just adds to it. Just imagine, say he doesn't win, but say he finishes like top 2 or top 3. How could Team USA not have Lucas Glover on it when he won the final regular season event, first playoff event, played well in the BMW, and then has a top 5 or top 3 finish in the Tour Championship? Like, how can he not be on the Ryder Cup team?
Josh, I think you're right. I don't think Lucas Glover, I think it's just a really hard spot. And, Bryson DeChambeau throws a wrench into it too, right? With how well he's played over on the Live Tour, and he played decent in the majors too, as well. I can't figure out how they would not take Lucas Glover, and I didn't have him on my team, right? I went with Cameron Young instead. I kind of like thinking that Zach Johnson will go a little bit more in terms of youngness with Cameron Young, not to be too literal there, but kind of take the younger player, get him some more exposure on this Ryder Cup team and keep moving forward too. But I don't really have a good argument for you why you would take Cameron Young over Lucas Glover besides that.
Yeah, and there's another kind of like side debate here. A lot of talk about, well, who would Brooks play with if he was on this team? And I say that if sort of off, tongue in cheek. He's going to be on the team. But who do you pair him with? And if you have one spot left where it's truly a toss-up, do you take a Live guy or do you take a PGA Tour guy to kind of benefit or give Brooks someone to play with?
I don't think you need to take a Live guy just to play with Brooks. That I don't think there's really much beef in terms of the players, whether they be on the Live Tour or on the PGA Tour. I think they're really Cantlay and Schauffele are going to play together most of the time. They've been really electric in Ryder Cups too. Yeah. If JT's on the team, he plays with Spieth, but JT's probably not going to be on the team, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to take a Live guy just in the sake of playing with Brooks Koepka. I think it was Wyndham Clark who said he would love to play with Brooks Koepka. I think most of these guys are going to say the same exact thing because Brooks Koepka is an incredible talent, a really good putter when it matters. We saw that, in Rochester at Oak Hill. So I don't think that you need to take a Live guy in that fact. But I do think Bryson DeChambeau has played well enough to have an argument to be on this Ryder Cup team.
Yeah, I mean, as I was going through this, I think my hot take would be of the whole season would be that I would rather have Bryson DeChambeau on my team than Cam Young.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, he's played better recently. He's been around playing these good golf team events too, as well, as Bryson DeChambeau. So I don't think your take is super warm. I think a lot of people would agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, and also I just think about, the energy that he would bring to the table. I think for people who have observed Bryson DeChambeau, the person over the last 2 years, there's been a big shift. Like he is not the same person that he was a couple, 3 years ago. His demeanor is a lot different. He seems to be enjoying himself more on the golf course. He's more kind of he's at least talking more like a team guy now than he ever has before. So, I just think he would bring more to the team than a guy like Cam Young, who frankly has just struggled across the board, especially with putting. His putting has been probably the worst part of his entire game. Obviously, he hits the ball a long way, but match play or in any of these formats, you need to be able to putt.
If Lucas Glover has a good standing in this Tour Championship, he takes that spot from Cameron Young. I think I've thought about it a little bit more now as we've gone along here. Especially Cameron Young didn't make the Tour Championship. He fell just outside that top 30 number. So as long as Lucas Glover plays, doesn't need to play, I don't think well, but he needs to play, decently better than average, right? And kind of, like you said, get in that top 3, top 5 finish. I think he could be on this team. But Josh, one thing I want to talk about too with the Ryder Cup, we don't have our teams announced. Obviously, we've been talking about it here, but I was looking at the odds. I think the Americans come in, that's a favorite. They're about minus 180, on the sports books as well. It's really hard to win in opposing soil. And we see the Americans trying to do that after they just blew them out at Whistling Straits here a couple of years ago. What do you think would be the outcome? Your initial thoughts on it? Because I haven't really given much thought to it yet, but I have some fun things to say.
Not this time. That's all I got to say. Not this time. I think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think it's going to be that close. We have seen this trend kind of taking shape over the last, 4 to 6 years, where American golf keeps getting better and better and better, and Euro golf is just not there right now. And I'm not sure what the reason is. I actually think there are some bigger issues with how European golf happens, and a lot of your top talent, they're playing on the PGA Tour all year. It's just, no, I don't think it's going to be close. I think a lot of people hope that it's close because they don't want to see a blowout, because that just wouldn't be fun to watch for most people. But no, I think Team USA is absolutely going to just ruin the European team. They are deep. Like, that's the problem. Everybody knows, like, sure, the European team will have 3 or so of the top 5 players in the world. But when you look at spots 6 through 12 on that team, whoever they end up being, and I'm not even sure who they end up being. Frankly, I'm not sure anybody knows who those guys will end up being. They will not be half as good as players 6 through 12 on Team USA.
So you just got to remember, it's on European soil. I mean, this makes a huge difference in my mind. I don't think the Americans have won in Europe in a long time, and that's something that's really important. We look at the last Ryder Cup and it was an absolute massacre, right, at Whistling Straits with the Americans, coming up on top. But on your depth argument, they don't really necessarily need to be deep. You take a look at the Ryder Cup and how it's functioned. The first few days, not everybody plays. You don't have to play everybody. This isn't modified basketball, right? Where everyone has to play their events, right? It's not until the final day where everybody plays. All 12 play in the singles matches against each other. So I don't think that's a huge deal where, these guys aren't playing. But if you take a look at the European team, they have a lot of good players. Viktor Hovland, Rory McIlroy, Sepp Straka, we talked about, Matt Fitzpatrick, are all playing well. And we didn't even talk about Jon Rahm, one of the best players in the world, who necessarily isn't striking the ball the way he would like to, but he can turn it on at any minute. Then you have Tyrrell Hatton, you have Tommy Fleetwood kind of rounding it out. I'm really interested to see this European team, kind of how they're constructed. I don't think guys like Ian Poulter or Sergio Garcia will make this team. Those are 2 guys that have been Ryder Cup mainstays for the last, I want to say 10 years, right? Now they've played really well. I've been watching some kind of old highlights too. Ian Poulter really took the sails out of the American teams a couple different times. But I don't think it's going to be a blowout, Josh. I think this is going to be close. I do think the Americans win, but I don't think it'll be a blowout in the fashion you think it will be.
European golf is so hard that Brian Harman just lapped the field a month ago.
Yeah, he did.
At the Open. Like, unless there is a monsoon with gale force winds, like, European golf is it is not the challenge that it was 25, 30, 40 years ago. And I think modern players have just proven that case time and time again here. So it's because of that I just don't read too much into that. Maybe there's also an element of some of these guys just being burned out at that point, right? Like, they take a few weeks off after the Tour Championship here, and maybe who wins is the team that is bringing the most energy and the most heat come that time. I don't know. So maybe it will be the home squad. Any other notes or thoughts heading into the Tour Championship here at East Lake before we look around the rest of the golf world?
Not too much for me. I think we're really, really now going to be looking at Lucas Glover, right, and seeing if he can kind of secure that final spot on the Ryder Cup team. Like I said, I think all he needs to do is play, average to above average, right, to get into the eye of Zach Johnson. I think Zach really hopes that he does that too, because he would love to bring a guy like Lucas Glover. He's been putting the lights out too. So anything on your side from Scottie Scheffler, or you just think he's going to cruise?
I think if he just plays average golf, he'll win. Like I said, the big question, and I picked him a couple weeks ago for me, is Jon Rahm. I kind of had that rant earlier about player of the year debate. Jon Rahm is that guy who's basically like viewed as Scheffler's counter for player of the year because he's got the major. He has just not looked like the same golfer that we saw in the first quarter to first third of this season, calendar year season. I would like to see, what would I like to see? I'd love to see Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Jon Rahm battling coming down the back nine. But I actually think the more likely outcome would be that Rahm kind of slips out, and we're talking about, the top three guys really being the ones that are in control coming into the final round. That includes Viktor Hovland, Scottie Scheffler, and Rory McIlroy.
Yeah. See Lucas Glover, see if he can drop a 65 on Thursday or Friday and put himself into that conversation.
Yeah. So what else? What do we have happening around the rest of the golf world?
Over across the pond, we'll start with the LPGA Tour for the AIG Women's Open. Lilia Vu gets her second major win of the season as she won earlier this year at the Chevron Classic. The 25-year-old American is here to stay, Josh. She's just played incredible on the LPGA Tour, as it's really great to see an American, next to Rose Zhang up there kind of taking these ranks. 2 majors in 1 year. Pretty incredible stuff.
Dominant. That's all there is to it.
Over on the Korn Ferry Tour, Chan Kim wins at the Magnet Championship. The 33-year-old gets his first Korn Ferry Tour win, an emotional win for him as he's grinded on some different tours. So congrats to Chan. Over on the Senior Tour, we had a really, really cool story. Sorry, go ahead.
33 years old. First win on Korn Ferry Tour, not even PGA Tour, Korn Ferry Tour. Ooh. That's some hard
speaking
work
of another hard work paying off story, Ken Duke, who, if you're a Twitter, now X.com, subscriber to the Monday Q on Twitter, you hear a lot about Ken Duke because he plays in a lot of these Monday qualifier events, carries his own bag a lot. As the 54-year-old, kind of breaks through and wins at the Shaw Charity Classic on the Senior Tour. That's his first win on the Champions Tour. It was his 100th start, Josh. He's been grinding out here in this Champions Tour to try to get a win. The last time he got a win on the PGA Tour was in 2013 at the Travelers Championship. So 10 years later, he wins on the Champions Tour. Just an awesome story for Ken Duke getting it done.
Wild.
And then the final story, we'll go through it quick, is Live Golf. It happened a couple weeks ago at Live Bedminster. Cam Smith won by 7. So just a pretty lapped field by Cameron Smith. I remember watching a little bit of that on that final round Sunday too. Cameron Smith he was up in command most of the tournament. So we'll put Liv to bed for a little bit of time. The next tournament is in Chicago the week before the Ryder Cup as they chug along with their season.
Yeah. So let's see here. We've got one regular event and a little bit of news that broke the other day. How do you read into, or the other night, how do you read into Justin Thomas committing to the event? What is it, 1 week or 2 weeks before the Ryder Cup?
2 weeks before the Ryder Cup, I believe, at the Fortinet. He just kind of has to, right? If he wants to play in the signature events, we saw how the PGA Tour kind of outlined that. You have to be in the top 50 of the FedEx Cup standings from the previous year. Justin Thomas is not, obviously. And you have to win. He did not. And then the next 15 players, 10 of which come from the fall PGA Tour season, which starts at the Fortinet. Coming in the top 10 gets you into that century, which can get you into more signature events. So Justin Thomas is going to be playing in this first one. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays and how many of these 7 events he's going to end up playing in to try to get in this top 10. Also, people are talking about as a possible Ryder Cup tryout, trying to get himself warm. I don't really see it that way. I kind of seeing it as Justin Thomas knows he's not going to be playing and he's going to be playing some other golf here 2 weeks before they head to Rome.
Yeah, you know what? I think this exposes one of the major flaws, I think, in this new process for how the field of these designated events the following year are decided. For as poorly as JT has played, he's still the 26th best golfer in the world.
Yes.
I know OWGR has its flaws, has its issues, but I don't really see how a guy who's the 26th best player in the world, a former number 1, could not be included in those designated events. I know he hasn't played well, and I know I've been a harsh critic of him, saying he definitely doesn't deserve a Ryder Cup spot. But what a time to have a bad year. What a time to have a slump. I mean, this guy has literally been one of the 5 to 7 most consistent golfers of the last decade, right?
Yes, for sure.
And he's always in that conversation with Rory McIlroy, with John Rahm, with all literally the best golfers on the planet. And here we are, like, talking about him needing to almost go back to Q school. Like, this feels a lot like being sent back to Q school after you've like climbed to the very top of the mountain like multiple times.
Yeah, it's definitely a wake up call.
It doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't feel right. So what are we saying? Like, you know, if he isn't successful going through this fall process, are we going to see Justin Thomas playing in a bunch of non-elevated events next year, just annihilating the field? Like, we get a pissed off version of Justin Thomas who just goes out and just destroys the field in all of these non-elevated events. Like, is that what the PGA Tour wanted? Like,
we might get a pissed off Justin Thomas in the Fortinet. He could lap the field and get into the signature events. I expect him to play well enough in whatever fall season events he plans on playing in and get into the Century, you know, at the start of the year.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just a very complicated issue that the PGA Tour is going to have to wrangle with here in the next year. Probably going to be some more changes. But hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Watch for our full betting lineups on TikTok and YouTube before the Tour Championship this week. Subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram as well. And of course, if you're going to get out there and play, you know the drill. Whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.